Hi, this is Matt with AppliancePartsPros.com. Today we'll be showing you how to repair your appliance. Remember, anytime you work on an appliance, make sure it's unplugged or the circuit breakers are off so there's no chance of electrocution. In this video we're going to show you how to change out the LG refrigerator fan motor. It's going to be a very easy repair and should only take a few minutes to show you how to do it. If you already have one of these, great. If not, you can click on the link below or get it at AppliancePartsPros.com. When you open up the package, you're going to get the new fan motor. The fan motor is located in the freezer section, and it's what circulates the cold air through the unit. The main reason you'd be changing it out is if the motor has failed and your fresh food section is getting warm because the cold air isn't being circulated. In order to change the part, we have to open up the freezer door. Now that we have the door open, we can remove the bin that holds all the food. You want to lift up on the back so these tabs come out. Once you have it angled up, then you can pull it backwards a little bit and lift it out. You may have to open up the door a little bit. Once you have it out, you can set it aside. Now we can take out the screws that hold the frame to the rails. We're going to use a Phillips screwdriver to take them out. Once we have this side out, we can go do the one on the other side. Now that we have both screws out, we can lift the assembly off the rails. In order to get the door assembly off, you're going to have to lift up so these front two tabs come off the bracket. And in the back, there's a little hook bracket, so you're going to have to pull it up and then pull it off at an angle. Once you have it off, you want to carefully set it aside so it doesn't get scratched or damaged. Once you have the door set aside, we can push the rails in and get them out of the way for now. Now we can take the upper rack out. All you have to do is pull it all the way out, and then there's a locking tab on each side that we have to release. All you have to do is press on the tab and lift up on the rack. Once you have both tabs released, you can lift up on the rack, and you have to angle it again just like the lower one, and then lift the whole assembly out. Once you have it out, you can set it aside and then push the rails back in. Now that we have the rack out, we can go inside the freezer and remove all the rails. We're going to take the upper rails off first. We're going to use our Phillips screwdriver to take the screws out. Once you have the screws out, you can pull the front of the rail away from the liner and then pull the back two tabs out of the liner and pull it out of the freezer. Now we can take the lower rails off. Before we take these off, we have to take the connecting rod off in the back. We want to pull these all the way out, and there's a little locking tab in between this gear wheel and its mounting plate. All you have to do is press on it, and then you can lift this assembly off. Once you have this side off, all you have to do is pull the other side out of the other gear. You don't have to take that one off. Once you have the connecting rod removed, you can push the rails back in and set the rod aside. Now we can use a Phillips screwdriver to take out the lower rails. You may have to tap on the rails to get the screws to drop out. Once you have all three screws out, you can lift the rail out and pull it out of the freezer. Once we have this side out, we can go do the one on the other side. Now that we have the rails out of the way, we can take the back panel off. First thing we're going to do is open up this access panel on the right side. We're going to use a putty knife to get in there and carefully release the locking tabs. To release them, you just want to stick the putty knife carefully in and flex it. Once you have the bottom released, we can go up and do the top. Once you have one side released, you can just pull the access panel out and set it aside. To get the rear panel off, there's a series of locking tabs that go around the whole outer perimeter of the panel. We're going to reach in right up here behind this opening, and there's one that we can release to relieve some of the tension, and then we can carefully pull the whole panel forward. Once you have all the locking tabs released, you want to carefully lower the panel down, don't let it drop. We have to reach up and disconnect those two wiring harnesses that connect to the back wall. Both wiring harnesses have a locking tab that you have to push to release so you can pull them out. And remember, the white one is on the top and the red one's on the bottom. Once you have them both disconnected, we can pull the rear panel out of the freezer. Now that we have the back panel out of the freezer, we can take the fan motor out of it. First thing we're going to do is take the wire harness off. It's just clipped underneath on this retaining clip. All you have to do is lift up on the clip and get the wires out from underneath it. Once you have the wires out, we can remove the fan motor. It's held in by two screws into the bracket. It's kind of hard to get the screws out. The fan blade's difficult to take off when it's in the housing. So we're going to reach in through the fan blade and take the screws out through here. Now that we have the screws out, we can lift the fan motor and blade assembly out. Once you have the fan motor assembly out, we can set the back panel aside. Now we can take everything off the assembly so we can put it onto the new fan motor. The fan blades are pretty fragile sometimes. If you can pull up on it and it comes right off, great. But if it's got some rust in there from the condensation over the years, you may have to put a drop of rust buster in it and let it sit for a second. And if it's still tight, you may have to come in with a small flathead screwdriver and pop this little retaining clip off. You want to make sure that you don't damage the fan blade or stretch the hole out, otherwise it won't sit tightly onto the new fan motor. When you're taking the spring clip off the fan blade, you want to be careful it doesn't fly off and get lost. Once you have the clip released, you can carefully pull the fan blade off the motor shaft. Now that we have the fan blade off, we can take this front cover off. There's a grommet on it. You want to make sure that it comes with the cover. And on the back of the motor, there's a grommet there. If the rear grommet stayed on the motor holding carriage on the back panel, make sure you grab it off of that so we can put it on the new motor. Here's the old fan motor next to the new one. If you already have one of these, great. If not, you can get it at appliancepartspros.com. In order to put the new fan motor into the assembly, we have to put everything back on it. First thing we're going to do is put the rear grommet on. All you have to do is push that on, make sure it stays in place. Now that we have the grommet on the back, we can put the front panel on. All you have to do is lower it down over the shaft, and you want to make sure that the wires are on the bottom and the tabs are up towards this side. Once you have the cover on the fan motor, we can put it back onto the back panel. To put it into the back panel, all you have to do is run the wiring harness through. And lower the motor into the assembly. You want to make sure that the grommet comes through on the bottom so it sits properly. And then we can use our Phillips screwdriver to put the screws back in to hold it in place. Now that we have the motor mounted, we can push the fan blade back on. You want to carefully slide it down the shaft until it bottoms out. Once you have the fan blade pushed all the way down onto the motor shaft, we have to put the spring clip on. It's flared on one side, so make sure the flare is towards the bottom. And just carefully push it over the fan hub. If you can't get it all the way down with your finger, you can take a small flathead screwdriver and work it down. Once you have the spring clip on, we can turn the back panel over and hook the wiring harness through its retaining clip. Once you have the wire harness secure, we can put the back panel back into the freezer. Now we can put the back panel into the freezer. Remember, as we lift it up, we want to make sure that these 3 tabs go into the slots in the back wall. Before you lift the panel into place, you want to make sure you grab the 2 wiring harnesses. We have to plug those in before we lift the panel totally up into place and snap it in. All you have to do is lift the panel up into the freezer, and then we're going to have to line up the plugs so we can plug them in. Remember, the red one was on the bottom. You want to make sure you plug them in so you hear them snap and get a good connection. And the white one was on the top. We can lift the back panel up into place. You want to line up the 3 tabs with the slots, push it back into place. Once you have the 3 tabs in the bottom, we can carefully go around and push all the locking tabs in all the way around. To put the excess cover in, you're going to snap one side in and just push the other side down so it snaps in. Now that we have the excess cover installed, we can put the rails back into the freezer. All you have to do is slide it back, and you want to line up the 2 tabs with the opening in the liner and lock it into place. Then you can push it against the wall of the freezer, and we can use our Phillips screwdriver to put the screws back in. The upper one goes in the same way. All you have to do is slide it back and line up the tabs with the opening in the liner and push them into place. Once you have the tabs in, you can push the rail against the wall of the freezer and we can put the screws in. Now we can do the rails on the other side. The ones on the right side go in the same way as the left side. All you have to do is line up the tabs into the liner, push them up against the wall, and put the screws in. Now we can put the upper one in. Now we can put the sport rod back in. First thing we're going to do is pull out the lower rails all the way. And then we're going to put the square end in onto this gear. Once you have it lined up, you can just push it in. On this end, we're going to lock it into the bracket. You want to take a small screwdriver and spin the locking tab so that the ears are at 9 and 3 o'clock. Once you have them lined up, we can lower it down and snap it into place. Once you have it snapped in place, the rails should move in and out together, and then we can put the door on. In order to put the door on, all you have to do is line up the tabs on the door rails with the openings in the freezer rails, and then you can lower it down and snap it into place. Once you have the door in place, you can push it in and out to make sure it slides in properly. And then we can use our Phillips screwdriver to put the screws in that holds the door to the rails. Now that we have the door secure to the rails, we can pull the upper rails out so we can put the upper basket in. To put the basket in, we're just going to line it up with the rails and make sure we snap it into place. Once you have the rear in, then we can just lower it down and lock the 2 front tabs in. Once you have the upper basket secure, you can push it all the way back in. In order to get the big lower basket in, we're going to open up the door all the way and angle it out to give us as much room as possible. To get the big basket in, we're going to feed the back up through each side, then lower it down and get the front underneath these tabs. And then we can lower the back down and make sure that these tabs in the back snap into place. Once you have the lower basket secure in place, you can close the freezer door, plug the refrigerator back in, and make sure it starts to cool. Thanks for joining us for another successful repair brought to you by AppliancePartsPros.com. Check out our other repair videos on our site, Facebook, and YouTube.